I made a video last week about how I make loads of compost in a small back garden, and I got a lot of feedback on the video, so I wanted to use this opportunity to point out some of the important things that I didn't point out in the original video, but also to address some of the frequently asked questions that people had about making compost in a small back garden, with a particular emphasis on answering the questions about composting in a fridge, which is the way that I do it. My best advice is to simply scatter all bush trimmings and leaves evenly over your lawn and then mow it up. The lawnmower will chop it up and mix all the materials perfectly, much more efficient than shredding separately, then manually mixing. That's a brilliant idea. You just have to make sure that your mower is up to the task of chopping up certain materials. So if you're cutting up any branches that are thicker than about 1/4 of an inch or 10 millimeters, your mower is probably not going to be able to do it, but it's a brilliant way of mixing them up together and making it smaller, which is the first and really important point. If you want consistent compost, then chopping it all up so that it's a fairly fine size will drastically increase the time that it takes for that material to break down, which is why chipping things up, or wood chip or shredded paper, are so effective at breaking down so quickly. That's a really effective way at this time of year, particularly if you've got loads of fallen leaves on your lawn. It mixes up the leaves with your lawn clippings, and that is like a ready-made, supercharged bit of stuff that you can chuck into the composter. It'll get really hot and it'll break down really quickly because it's all chopped up and thin materials. And I've noticed this when I've been to other people's houses and they've shown me their composters and they're wondering why it won't work. And often it's because the materials in there are just too big. So they've put whole branches that are keeping lots of the smaller materials separate. Now, it will eventually break down. If you leave a pile of logs or a pile of sticks for long enough, it'll break down. But it might test your patience, and if you're trying to make loads of compost, you're not going to be making it very quickly if you're doing it that way. So yes, use your lawnmower to chop things up, so long as you're not going to damage your lawnmower doing it. You figure that out, whether you want to use your lawnmower for that, and if you're worried about breaking it or damaging it. Clearly you'll need to sharpen the blades a bit more frequently if you're making it do that sort of work, but it's a brilliant idea, and chopping up your compost is really important. Do you close the lid and do you drill holes in the bottom for worms? Do you drain or tap off excess liquid? Yes, in the original video that I made, I showed that I drilled holes in the back of the fridge, which is now at the bottom, just to let any excess fluid in there drain out, but also it does let worms in, and you can see here that there are loads of worms in the compost. They tend to come in once it's cooled down. You actually see them trying to escape when the compost gets really hot, because clearly they don't like it ridiculously hot, because if it gets to 60 degrees, that's like hotter than a hot bath. So the worms are not really appreciating that sort of heat. But yes, they then come in later on. When I was doing more contracts to do with clearing up at abandoned properties, or doing work for people who had had a house that had been in probate for a long time and nobody had been there, we used to find bags of stuff that would be like in a shelf on the shed, and it would be absolutely chock full of worms. So I don't quite know how the worms got in there. I don't study the life cycle of worms a great deal, but there would be worms on the top shelf of something that had broken down in a shed. So the worms tend to get into places whether you intend for them to get in there or not, but I imagine they do probably come in through the holes at the bottom. Some of my neighbours drop off their grass and hedge clippings, so I get to make about 3 times the amount that I would manage normally. I also clear the street of leaves for mulch. The title of the video was making loads of compost in a small garden, and so being able to acquire more materials is something that will allow you to make a lot more compost. I get tons of extra materials because of the work that I do, but it's probably not very useful advice to suggest that everybody just become garden contractors. But in the absence of that, it's really, really easy. If you wanted to get hold of materials for nothing, you just ask your neighbours, ask local cafes. They'll be getting rid of coffee grounds, as somebody pointed out, and they'll be happy to give it away. So if you want to get extra materials because you're not getting enough materials from your garden, or you wanted to make a bigger composting area in your garden because you needed it for vegetable growing, I guarantee you that there are loads of ways that you can get free materials to make compost, because most people just think of it as waste. Did you just find this fridge? Are you worried about toxins from the fridge? Are you keeping the lid open a lot? Excited about this method, as most rodent-free backyard composting setups are expensive due to the bin? Thanks. Yes, I did just find this fridge. I think once you keep an eye out for them, you'll see that people fly tip fridges all the time, especially in cities, and that's the method that I would suggest, and I'll come on to the reason for that in a minute. As for toxins, I don't know what toxins would be in the fridge. Obviously the fridge, when used for its intended purpose, which is not this, is a food safe item. But I'd defer to anybody in the comments if you know of any reason why you shouldn't, or if there's anything in the fridge that might make it dangerous. But in my experience, I've been doing this for, I think, 3 years now, and I've had no issues with any of the things that I've grown or eaten. So if you know of anything that's detrimental, then if you could point us towards some resources for that, that would be great. Great idea. Next time I have a freezer or fridge that breaks, I'm repurposing it. Okay, so what do you do with the refrigerant in the tipped fridge? I thought it was dangerous. I hate to be the one to say this, but surely a fridge is a terrible idea. They contain HFCs, which are hydrofluorocarbons, which is the refrigerant gas, which are hugely damaging to the ozone. This is why there are recycling pathways for fridges. Lots of people trying to be green, putting old fridges in their back garden would be hugely ironic. So this is a really good point. Fridges do have refrigerant gases in them, which are supposed to be recycled. But the fridge that I got, and I refer to the video where I decided to do this, I explained that in lots of the fly tip fridges, scrap collectors come round with a pair of pliers and they just cut off the compressor because that's valuable scrap material. But that does mean that then the gases have leaked. And then you have a fridge that is total scrap and nobody wants to collect it. And I can guarantee that if you find a fridge that's been left outside where someone's dumped it, a scrap collector will have already cut the compressor out. So this is the way that you should be doing it, rather than getting a fridge from somebody that already has the compressor still on it and the gases ready to be recycled. So if you can recycle your fridge rather than doing this with it, and then get a fridge that's been dumped that somebody's already nicked the compressor out of, if you want to be responsible about it. But ultimately it doesn't really matter what container you use. There are lots of different ways that you can get your compost hot by insulating whatever bin that you make, or if you are able to collect enough materials from elsewhere, then you could get a big enough compost that it self-insulates. How you pronounce compost is my biggest problem with is how you're pronounced compost. Say it with me, compost. You are pronouncing compost, tomato, tomato. So long as we both know that the idea that we're communicating is the detritus made from garden waste that we subsequently use to fertilise our gardens and enrich our soil, I don't care if you call it compot. Maybe don't call it that, because then it's not communicating the same idea. Compost, compost, compot. Wonder what the nitrogen to carbon ratio of that is. And the other question that came up a lot was, how does it get aerated when there's no holes in the side of it? And the answer to that is just when I put this stick in and turn it over, that gets loads of air into there, and I don't have to keep the lid open, and that gets all the oxygen in there that it needs. So even if there's holes in the side, the oxygen getting all the way to the middle of the pile is never actually that great anyway. So manually moving it, either using one of those compost corkscrew things that you drill in, would probably be easier than just using this stick. But this is what I've got, and it does the trick. It's not particularly hard to operate it. I hope that answers most of your questions, and I've been doing this for quite a few years now and I've not had any issues with it, so I'd suggest trying it if you're interested in making loads of good quality compost in your back garden, if you're not working on a massive scale. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.